unemployment, which seems to be at an all-time high. According to a recent study by the Center for Monitoring the Indian Economy, India's unemployment rate is at a 2-year high, while the unemployment rate rose to 6.9% in October. The labour participation rate, which measures the proportion of adults actually willing to work, has fallen by 6%. In 1 year, there have been 2.4% fall in the estimated number of people employed, and the count of unemployed persons looking for jobs has almost doubled. So this is extremely concerning numbers that are now coming out. So even as GDP numbers GDP seems to be recovering, that means the Indian economy is actually growing. It's the unemployment numbers that will cause that are a big cause of concern. So which is something that youth across the country have been talking about for quite some time, despite the fact that they are qualified, they've got degrees, they just do not find the right jobs for them, often having to pick up jobs in other fields. But this report, of course, talks about how the unemployment rate for the month of October touched 6.9%. And the number of unemployed, of course, those seeking jobs has doubled. Let's go across to my colleague Tanima Biswas joining us from the newsroom. So Tanima, just explain to our viewers the key takeaways here from this report, because you know, it's a stark contrast to the growth story that's being told on one side, where the economy seems to be growing, but the jobs just aren't there.
That's right, Viren, as you were saying, that some of the key numbers that we have to in fact see from this report which has come out, which is a study on unemployment rates peaking in the country over the past 2 years or so. What it's basically saying is that the number of, whereas the number of jobs is what the government is saying, that this is something that they are looking at, but actually the job creation on ground, which during this time of the year between September and October is supposed to be the highest. That is the time when the number of job creation has actually dipped, and it is not up to the level that would suffice for the economy. What the report also says is that the number of unemployed people in October 2018 stands at 397 million, which is slightly lower than what it was in October 2017 at 407 million, but nonetheless quite a large number. And in tandem to that, the number of jobs created has not been that much. In fact, the number of adults who are seeking jobs stands at around 29 million. So that's also a large number that the government will have to look at. Of course, these are figures which are part of an independent study. Whether or not these are also figures which the government accepts and admits to, that is something we'll have to wait and see what people at the Niti Aayog and in the central government will have to say. But essentially, this report coming just ahead of the assembly elections in certain key states, as well as the fact that this is in the run-up to the 2019 general elections, is something which could embarrass the government, because we have also seen in several states which are going into elections just in a few days from now, they have also the number one election issue in some of these states also seems to be unemployment. Viren?
And you saw that firsthand, didn't you, when you went to Chhattisgarh, Tanima, because that's a story not just of Chhattisgarh but across the country. But tell us the story that you heard from the people of Chhattisgarh as you traveled through the length and breadth of the state about what what their biggest concerns were regarding employment. In some cases, of course, they have a job, but it's nowhere in the field that they actually are qualified to be in.
That's right. In fact, what we saw was that there were a number of, they grapple with both educated unemployment as well as unemployment in some of these rural areas. In fact, in educated urban centers, what we saw was that the number of jobs which could be created for white collar workers, whether it's in the IT sector or otherwise, that seems to be missing. There are lots of young boys who we met who had in fact got training in engineering colleges or other technical colleges, but who were sitting at home for months because they could not get jobs. Of course, the other problem that Chhattisgarh also has is the fact that a lot of these young villagers who are living in areas which are Maoist hit, which have been dominated by Maoists, they also have problems because there is no job being created. Development has not even reached those areas yet. So they come to urban centers looking for work, but that also seems to be, there seems to be an unequal balance, because what some of these young boys were also saying is that some of the jobs which were created, especially in the mining industries over over there, that also seems to be going to outsiders who are more qualified, so to speak, because the education level that the outsiders have access to is probably higher than some of these people living in Maoist-dominated areas. So they seem to be losing out both ways, in their native villages, in their native areas, as well as when they come to the urban centers of Chhattisgarh, which do not seem to be having enough jobs to offer to its young people. Viren.
Right. Okay, I've got Santosh Mehrotra, who is a professor of labor, who's joining us on the phone line. He is an expert in this field. Professor, thanks so much for speaking to us here on Mirror Now. One thing, as you read this survey, the numbers are quite stark. 6.9% rate of unemployment over the month of October. What are your key takeaways from this particular survey?
See, the Center for the Monitoring of the Indian Economy has a very large sample size. Its sample size is bigger than that of the National Sample Survey. And since early 2016, it has been the most credible source of data on employment in the economy. It covers both the organized as well as the unorganized sector. In other words, anyone who pretends to claim that it doesn't cover the unorganized sector is totally off the mark. I find that the numbers that you have just been citing quite credible because for a variety of reasons, we know that the economy itself has not been doing as well as we would like it to. First, we all know that for some time, bank lending to industry has been extremely low. Second, the MSME sector, meaning the micro, small and medium enterprises sector, which was impacted very adversely by the demonetization about 2 years ago, has never really recovered. And had it recovered, the government would not have felt the need to suddenly provide a new package, credit package for MSME industries, which it is now beginning to put in place. Thirdly, we know that exports, which were well over $300 billion in 2014, have never really risen in the last 4 years beyond that $315 billion number. They actually fell after 2014. And one of the very important reasons why they fell was precisely the fact that the unorganized sector, MSMEs, actually contribute about half of all India's exports.
Correct.
So exports actually fell, and they have only just barely begun to recover.
Right.
And they haven't even gone beyond the 2014 levels. All of this has shown up in, fourthly, the fact that capacity utilization in industry has been around 70%. It has risen slightly in recent months. And capacity utilization remains low. So, so overall, we have a situation where the investment to GDP ratio has fallen well below what it was about 5 years ago.
Right.
It has begun to revive a little bit, but only a little bit.
Right.
I mean, the fact that...
Professor, we'll have to leave it at that. Appreciate you joining us here on the broadcast. Thanks for your thoughts and your inputs on this story.